What is your name and job title?
My name is Omar. I'm one of the invasive plant species interns here at Wertheim.
What does a typical day look like for you?
Typically, we report to the office, take a look at the calendar to see what the plan is. Invasive species are all over Long Island, so it really varies at what location we'll be doing our work in.
What is an invasive species?
An invasive species is basically one that's not native, so it's not one that is something that would be here normally. It's usually almost always brought as an ornamental plant, and then it ends up getting out of hand.
Why is invasive species removal important for our ecosystem?
So the reason that it's so important to remove them from our native ecosystems is because one of the reasons that they are invasive is because there's no natural mechanisms at work to keep them in check, to limit their spread or their numbers. So it's something that we have to be proactively involved in.
Is it hard work removing invasive species?
It really depends on what species of plant we're talking about, as well as how well established it's become. Usually if it's a small patch, it could be maybe 30 minutes to an hour or two, and then once you're dealing with extremely large patches, it could be something that takes years to deal with.
What tools do you typically use when removing invasive species?
So if you can get the population of invasive plants early enough, usually mechanical means is good enough to deal with it, such as hand pulling, mowing, cutting, etc. We try to avoid using chemical means to control it because usually chemicals are not species specific with what they target, and a lot of native plants can be harmed with that method.
How can you tell if a plant is a native species or an invasive species?
So there's a lot of good resources available to people if they want to find out. There's plenty of books about invasive plants. There's a lot of information online. The Fish and Wildlife Service website even has good pictures and descriptions with which plants are invasives and the most problematic to deal with.
Is there anything the public can do to help protect our native species on Long Island?
Yes, so one of the things that you can do is keep an eye out for invasives in your own backyard. That's a really easy one. Of course, you're going to be very well versed with the surrounding environment. Another thing that you can do is if you happen to see it where you're hiking, there are sources like IMAP Invasives. It's an app that you can download on the phone where you can basically upload data of points with where you found what species of invasive plants.
Do you have any advice or tips on how to stop the spread of invasive species?
So the best way would be to plant, really focus on planting native plants in your backyard. Most of the time with these invasive plants, it's pretty much brought on as an issue because they were planted as ornamental plants, which ended up escaping, their immediate location and spreading.
Okay, so right now I'm going to show you some examples of the invasive species that we have here on Long Island. So the first example that we have is this bush called Multiflora Rose. So you can tell that it's Multiflora Rose because if you look at these leaves right here, they're tiny in teardrop shaped, and they also have very tiny serrated edges. When they're in bloom, they'll show yellow and white flowers. Now, the reason that Multiflora Rose is so detrimental to our habitat is because, like many invasive plant species, they don't have any natural predators that predate on them, and so they spread very rapidly. And also, as you can see, they have a lot of spines on here, and so they're not really something that most animals want to eat. And another example of an invasive plant species here that has a similar issue is this plant right here. It is called Mugwort. So because it grows so fast and doesn't have any natural things that eat it, it spreads all throughout here. If we look behind here, this whole area is filled with mugwort. Now, one cool thing about mugwort is that it is actually edible. Now, you don't want to eat a ton of it, or it may make you sick, but it can be used as a spice. It's actually really yummy on potatoes. So next time you see mugwort, maybe pick some and try it out. So today we are out here at Elizabeth Morton pulling some invasive species. The two things that we're pulling right now is this very aggressive vine called Mile a Minute. It gets its name because it grows extremely fast. And you can tell that it's Mile a Minute because of these triangular leaves right here. And then we've also got Wineberry. It's a very prickly little fella here. And you can tell by all the prickles and then the red vines. It is really important that we're pulling these invasive species because what they do is because they grow so fast and don't have any natural predators, they outcompete all the native plants here and kill them. And we don't want that for our native plants. So that's why we're pulling these Mile a Minute and Wineberry right now.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is the only agency of the U.S. government whose primary responsibility is the conservation of the nation's fish, wildlife, and plants. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is very concerned about the impacts that invasive species are having across the nation. Invasive plants and animals have many impacts on fish and wildlife resources. Invasive species degrade, change, or displace native habitats and compete with our native wildlife and are thus harmful to our fish, wildlife, and plant resources.